Hi everyone, I'm going to be discussing Lazarus's theory and Folkman's theory on stress, coping, and adaptation. He describes this theory as how a person copes with stressful situations. The theory focuses on how a person perceives what is going to happen. He states that it's a process-oriented approach and is directed towards what an individual thinks is actually going to happen. It's the person's view of the situation, and not so much, it's not defined, stress isn't defined in this theory as the environment. It's the personal response. The theory is a transaction theory, and it's based on three theories. It was based on the general adaptation syndrome, the theory of soldier paratroop anxiety, anxiety associated with fear versus anxiety associated with failure, and the model of stress theory. The concepts, there's three major concepts of this theory: primary versus secondary appraisal. Primary appraisal is what the person's assessment is of the stressor, and the secondary is the assessment of the controllability, what they feel they can control of the stressor. Coping effects and outcomes. Coping effects are the strategies used by the individual to mediate the primary and secondary appraisals. And lastly, the dispositional coping styles is the behavior that can affect the person's emotional or functional reaction to the stressor. They become familiar with it, they find ways to cope, and it becomes relatively stable over time. Oh, I wonder why it's not. Theory analysis. Overall, even though the theory was revised over the years, it was written based off four other theories. It's relatively clearly defined. The statements are theoretically and operationally defined within the theory, and the major concepts have well-written examples and are defined appropriately. The theory is important to the practice of nursing for many reasons. Nurses can assess the effects of stress, both the physical and psychological, and assess the coping skills that the individual uses. This is important when you consider how an individual will react to certain illnesses they're encountering, and it's important to consider certain cultural backgrounds and help them assess what can help them cope with their stressors. Application to practices. Nurses can develop care plans that can evaluate the patient's perception of the stressor and how their stress can affect their functional status. They can help determine ways to cope with that, what they are going through, whether it be an acute illness or family stress, and they could focus on that. This is a review of literature. Most of the literature I found was written by Lazarus and Folkman, and it focused just on the outline of the major concepts of the theory and how it could be related just to even healthcare, everyday world, such as relationships. Gave pretty good examples of it. The coping theory and research, past, present, and future, that one was really good. It focused on key concepts of health and healing. It was just a brief article written by him, and it focused on it focused on healthcare. And these are the other two literatures that just described like person-environment relationships and applying it to immediate cognitive appraisal and coping. The future. The concepts of stress, coping, and adaptation are vital components to the nursing field. This theory can support future evidence-based practice, but I believe that more evidence with measurable outcomes need to be applied. And in the future, the theory can provide research focusing on the effects of stress and how will it affect the patient in their healing process and their own perceptions of the process. And that's all I have. Thank you. And these are my references. Okay.